Hey guys, and welcome to what is the final part of a three-part series, Keep, Loan, Sell or Buy Potential Incomings. And this one is the forwards. If you haven't seen part one, goalies and defenders, or part two, we will put this up on the, which is the midfields, we'll put it up on the end screen of this video, but you can also just go on to recently watched videos and you'll be able to find it for us. I'm joined again by acting sporting director Lewis. How you doing, mate?
Hi, Dave. Excited for the final part,
mate. This is good. This is the big one. This is now, guys. We're going to be looking at all the current squad, but Lewis, with his scouting network, has identified 6 potential players that could be coming in to help Wolves in the forward lines, and he's going to be explaining why. He's identified these and how they're going to fit into Wolves. So make sure you do stay tuned for all of that. And we're going to, obviously, it's going to be a really interesting one because this is, unlike the midfield, it's an area of significant interest and potential change as the club approaches the 24-25 Premier League season. Gary O'Neill, of course, will be keen to add depth and quality in this part of the squad, particularly as after the injuries impacted the team so much last season. And so we're going to take a closer look at the current forward, potential departments, transfer needs, and potential incomings. We're going to start, who's first on the list, Pablo Sarabia. Now, Pablo Sarabia, his contract runs until 2025. He is apparently Wolves' top wage earner. Despite this, he's not a regular starter in the team. Do Wolves sell? Do you want to sell him or find a new club? Finding enough to pay his high salary. His contract ends in around about 12 months. Lewis, sporting director Lewis, what we're doing with Pablo?
Yeah, so I think for me, Pablo is one of, if not the best technical player, we have players we have at the club, and he's capable of producing moments like the goals he was involved in against Tottenham last season.
We've seen moments of pure quality from him. But they have been far and away in between, not consistent enough. Maybe he'll argue that he hasn't enough, but he was kind of like the only forward we had left, so you can't really judge him on that when he's playing. He hasn't got all the quality around him. It hasn't quite worked out for him, but we have seen so much potential. And as I say, he's the highest paid player apparently on the Wolves squad.
Yeah. And he's entering his final year of his contract as well. So there's a decision that has to be made. I mentioned that obviously with Semedo too in the first part, that a clear decision has to be made and the club have to be comfortable with the decision they make. If I was the club, I would make it before the end of the summer transfer window in order to, and the two options would be sign a reduced deal or, and this is the decision I'd make, I'd be leaning more towards move him on. Obviously, you mentioned it could be tricky to find a club who would be willing to pay Sarabia's wages. But I think the type of player Sarabia is, obviously he's a forward player, he's coming to the end of his career. I could see him moving to Saudi Arabia or even America, where the wages become far less of an issue. Obviously, we know Saudi Arabia can pay almost whatever they can afford, whatever. America can also, there are very rich American owners out in the MLS. So I think a move to a second-tier league could suit Sarabia, and it could also mean we recoup as much as that 5 million transfer fee which we paid for him back in January 2020. I think it was 5 million from PSG, wasn't it, Dave?
Was it as low as that? That's probably why wages are so high.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of deals, the same as I mentioned it back in March time. I think about Adams. Exactly. You don't pay very much for the player. The agent tells you, look, we'll bring him to you for a low fee, but we want to make sure we earn some off the deal as well. Yeah. So I think if I was the club, I'd look to move Sarabia on, try and get that money in for the profit, maybe even, but definitely at least you get the wages off the books.
So he's a sell for you. That brings us on to the next one, Hwang Hee-chan. Obviously, he can play anywhere across the forward line. Mixed bag of performances this year. Obviously, he picked up his injury again. But the fact that he's, rate him highly because he's South Korean and there's a market that they're looking in. Hwang has until 26 remaining on his contract. What are we doing with him?
Yeah, and I think it's also important that it's to mention that it's no secret how much Gary likes Hwang. You know, he's a versatile player. Sometimes he plays in off the left, sometimes he plays through the middle. And he's coming off the back of his most prolific season at Wolves. You know, he had some bad games. I think mostly he had good games, but there were a few games that really stood out in people's memories of being poor performances from him. I think that's just what is kind of holding him back from becoming a real fan favourite, because really he was quite important for us last season. As you mentioned, he also offers a significant commercial interest, attracting at least one group of South Koreans to every home game. You know, I always see them in and around the stadium. So with that in mind, and the club obviously in a fairly strong position contract-wise, I think it makes sense to keep Hwang around. Obviously, moving forward, maybe the end of next season, there could be a decision that has to be made. Particularly, I think it's if he remains fit, because he's had an injury every year since he's been at the club, and I think that isn't great, especially when, you know, as we had last season, we had so few kind of forwards available to us. But I think, you know, his commercial, the benefits of him commercially is he was in good form for most of the season last year. So I'd definitely keep Hwang this season.
Absolutely. Matheus Cunha, obviously signed last summer. Contract runs till 2028. Obviously, he saw his hat-trick against Chelsea. We've seen flashes of absolute brilliance from him. He's expected to play more of a prominent role in this season. Obviously, he picked up that injury last year, but he's also, because of his, how well he's been doing and how he's been growing into Premier League, there's a lot of interest and many admirers. But surely, unless it's an unbelievably high offer that comes in for him because of how long he's left on his contract, Wolves will want to keep Matheus Cunha. He's also a bit of a leader on the pitch as well.
Yeah, I think when he arrived, obviously back in January 2023 for 50 million euros, I was quite unsure how that would play out. Quite conscious that in the past, when we've signed players for that kind of money, the transfer hasn't always worked out in the way we all would have hoped. But yeah, he's really come into his own, especially this season, this last season, under Gary. Again, same as Hwang, Gary loves him, the way he plays. He's very tenacious, he's very energetic. And he's not necessarily the type of striker we should look to be buying this season, but he's definitely such an integral part to what Gary is doing. And like you said, Dave, unless a massive offer comes in, he's in the same boat as Aït-Nouri and Gomez for me. He should be retained unless that big offer comes in, especially when we made such a big offer to get him in. So
yeah, wasn't it in the summer? Was it? It was in the January that he came in.
Exactly.
Wasn't it? Yeah, it was in the January. So it's 18 months he would have been at the club. It wasn't in the summer, of course. It was under that period when we need to get out of it under a whole Lopetegui. He's probably Lopetegui's one of his key players. But again, sometimes it just takes players time to adapt. And Cunha's certainly one of those, and I think he could be a massive player for us next year. So I'm, with you, I definitely would want to see him. I think he's got a great personality about him as well. He's potentially, if Chiwome was sold, which we talked about in part one of the defenders, there's 2 or 3 potential captains. Mario Lemina being one. I also see Matheus Cunha as another option. And obviously Wilson would be another one, but because he's just got that presence about him, and he's obviously also seems to have been instrumental in Pedro Lima, who it's not been announced as we record this video, coming in. He's a Brazilian as well, and he's been a big influence on helping that deal. Looks like it's going to go Wolves' way as well. So yeah, that's a good one. Then we come on to Pedro Neto, came on against Portugal. For Portugal, against who did they play? Was it Georgia? No, that wasn't playing Georgia.
Czech Republic, I think, Dave.
Czech Republic, yeah. Within 2 minutes, he provided an assist for the winning goal. We know that he's capable of dazzling runs getting vital goals. He remains a crucial part of Wolves' attacking prowess. His contract runs until 2027. So kind of indicated if you so Wolves require substantial compensation for this. A record-breaking figure of about 60 million has been touted, and obviously, his performances at the Euros could certainly affect that. The only one drawback with Pedro Neto, he's an amazing player on his day. I think he's world class personally, but he's injured so often. Your sporting director, Lewis. Ideally, you'd love him to stay because he can offer, but he can command a big fee. What are you doing, Lewis?
Yeah, I think a tough decision has to be made with Neto because, as you say, Dave, on his day, he's probably one of the top 4 or 5 right wingers in the league. He's really capable, and you saw that quality in the Portugal-Czech Republic game. 2 minutes on the pitch, it's an assist. How many times we saw that last season? But the key for me is when he's fit, and he struggles to stay fit. He's had so many injuries over the past few seasons, and that's where the kind of dilemma is. Do you keep him? And also bear in mind his contract's going to be running down 1 year less at the end of next season. So do you keep him around with the hope that he plays 25 to 30 of the games and provides enough quality to justify keeping him around? Or do you sell him for such a significant fee, which could be 60 million, but also it could be a bit higher if he has a good Euros, and that enables the club to do all. Well, yeah, exactly. It could be, but that fee, if it's 50, if it's 70, it allows the club to do all the business that we've spoke about without losing another key player. And I think that's a tough decision, but the key for me is the depth, and we lack that a lot. And if we sold Neto for the money that's been bandied around, it means that we gain that depth, and that's our biggest limitation. Our biggest limitation isn't goals and assists, because we have players capable of that in Hwang, Cunha, players returning such as Chiquinho, who we're going to talk about in a minute. They have goals and assists in them, but one player isn't equivalent to the depth that we lack. So I'd look to sell Neto this summer.
Okay, so but that's what fee would you? What's the fee that minimum fee you're letting go for?
Well, like you said, Dave, the Euros can either add 10 million on, or it can take away 10 million. The worst case scenario is he gets injured at the Euros, and I really hope that doesn't happen. I think the minimum fee I take for Neto is 45, and that's if he has a terrible Euros and comes back and he's able to force his way into a sale that the club don't really want. That's the minimum fee. On the other side of that, the maximum fee, if he has a fantastic Euros, he comes out and says how much he loves Wolves, and he makes it really difficult for the buying club. It could be upwards of 70 million or upwards, but I don't expect that at all. I'd say 60 million is about right for me.
Absolutely. And the next one, is that Enzo Gonzalez there?
Yeah, that's Enzo Gonzalez, yeah.
So obviously Enzo Gonzalez, bit of a tough debut season. Obviously, he's bought in. He's another one of these hot prospects for, made the bench for a couple of Premier League games in April, had a brief debut against Palace. What are you thinking with Enzo?
I think
his
Enzo,
contract runs until 2029.
Yeah, it's another tough one because, as you say, his contract position is fine, so there's no need to worry about that. But I think he is a young player who needs to play. And obviously the club see him as a long-term replacement for Neto, already lined up, and that's really good planning from the recruitment squad side of things. But I don't see him as an immediate like-for-like replacement for Neto. I don't see him being our number 7 if Neto leaves. So I think a tough decision has to be made of. If you let Sarabia and Neto go, do you let Gonzalez go on loan to play, which is the best thing for him? Or does he stay on the bench and come in when required, when the fixtures get busy and when there's cup games available to him? I think that's a really tough decision. Me personally, because of the requirements in the squad elsewhere, and you've only got so much time and kind of manpower to do the business that you need to do in the transfer market. If you loan him, you'll probably need to bring in a replacement for him. So for me, it makes more sense to keep him this summer than
We've got
loan
Rodrigo
him.
Gomez that's coming now.
That's true, actually. I do have him on my notes, but actually, Dave, that could sway me because I do have him on my notes as a right wing, actually. So yeah, I might look to loan Gonzalez this year. That's
So
really
really,
swayed.
he's a bit of a floater between the two, but if the right transfer window happens,
Yeah, I
and we've
think
got the depth, then you
a
give him
loan
a loan.
to a championship side could be really useful to him to getting used to playing in England. And obviously, he looked really good against Palace, but the small bit I saw of him. Yeah. But what I liked about him was he was physical, and that would really suit the championship too. So obviously, he's a bit small, he's maybe a bit lightweight, but I think I don't think he'd struggle for physicality in the championship. I think he'd rise to that challenge, and I'd like to see him play actually. So yeah, like you said, young right winger should go on loan.
Now who's the next chap that we've got up here?
Well, that is their new signing, Dave, Rodrigo Gomez, and obviously just signing him. If we loan him Gonzalez,
isn't it? Yeah, absolutely, Rodrigo Gomez. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, he's going to be kept.
His half his head's missing. That's why I was like.
Yeah.
So he's obviously going to be. You're not going to loan him out, surely.
No, he's going to be a part of the squad next season.
And what are your first initial thoughts on Gomez?
I really like him for a few reasons. Firstly, from the clips I've seen, he's a very skillful player. He offers something. He's very direct, which I like in a winger. That reminds me of Jeremy Doku at Man City, how he runs at players.
If you don't like the player that Jeremy Doku is, we've got a player.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
he's been keeping Grealish out.
Yeah, he looks like if he's that type of player, it's really exciting to me. But also, what I do like about the clips I saw, you always have to take highlights with a pinch of salt because any player can look good on highlights, But he can score goals too. He can finish chances, and if he can be that skillful and he can finish chances, well, that's a really exciting player to me. And obviously, the recruitment team have worked closely with his agent, and that should be a job well done there for the recruitment side of things. Well done to them to get that deal over the line.
Nice and early as well. So who you got next up?
The next player we have is Chiquinho.
So we've got Chiquinho. So obviously this was a very interesting Portuguese winger. Did well on loan at Famalicão, I think, if I say that right. Has attracted interest from other clubs. Wolves haven't ruled out a sale, but surely O'Neill will want to assess the 24-year-old. He's on contract until 2026. I remember when he first broke through in the Wolves side, and that the way he crosses a ball, it's like a Beckham-esque, the way he crosses them in. He's one for me. I'd love him to make it this season. I think I'd love him to make it this season. But like from you as the sporting director, what's the decision you're making? Do you think it's all reliant on what Gary O'Neill says in the when he sees him in pre-season?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is for Gary to see him in training. There's no rush to make a deal. In the early days of the window before Gary's had a chance to see him. Obviously, there is interest from Sporting Lisbon, and apparently they're talking about a £10 million fee. I wouldn't be against the sale entirely because I think £10 million is okay, especially if we get favourable terms in the deal, like a sell-on clause and things like that. But ultimately, I think Gary has to make a decision because he's never seen this player. When he arrived, I think he was already gone to his loan. So I think Gary spending time with him in pre-season is the best thing that can happen. And obviously, if we're losing Sarabia, who's typically played as a winger, and also Gonzalez and Neto, I'd like Chiquinho as a bit of depth as well. But if offers started to come in at around 17 million, well, maybe that changes my opinion slightly. But ultimately, I'd really like to keep Chiquinho because, as you said, when I saw him for the first time, a lot of promise. And I think it's time for him to come back to Wolves now after a few loans.
I agree. I'd love to. I think most Wolves fans would really want to see Chiquinho and give him a go. He can also, he can if he got the first half of the season and it's not quite working out, he's not getting the game time. He can sell him in January potentially if he want to bring in some funds. But he can be quite exciting and he's quick. And depending on what happens, obviously with Pedro Neto and like Enzo and Sarabia, if they all end up going, then you need that depth, and I think he's definitely one. So I'd like to keep him as well, and I'm with you on that one. Then we come on to obviously John Body. Good. I've got myself tongue. Good. Sorry, that's another complete player altogether. Saša Kalajdůić. What am I on about? We're coming on to Saša Kalajdůić. Obviously, his tall frame, aerial ability, Wolves different attacking options. Not made a mark in the Premier League, but he has had a lot of injured. He got injured again. This was one that is a lovely bloke. They did a whole series on his rehabilitation. But what do they do with him, man? It's like, obviously, he's not even going to be fit for the start of the season. So, what do you do?
He won't be sold in the summer because he won't be able to be sold. And it is a shame for him, Dave, because it's the same injury again and again.
Different knee.
But the same same duration out and things like that. So the psychological toll on him will be big. It will be he'll be struggling a lot. But I think football is a ruthless game, and ultimately you're paying a player's wages who we've seen for about 5 or 6 game weeks in total since he's been here. That's not good enough. So maybe he could be fit by January, and he could maybe play some games in the December, and he comes off the bench a couple of times and maybe gets a couple of goals.
Well, Gary clearly didn't really fancy him, did he? Because he let him go out on loan, and of course he wasn't going to get a game time. He wanted to sort of make the Euros. Obviously, it didn't work out for him because of the injury. But Gary O'Neill had a really good look at him. He scored that nice goal against Everton.
Bournemouth as well. He played at Bournemouth away.
He is something different, but you can't sell him.
I think if you get the opportunity to in maybe the next window after this summer, maybe the best thing to do is to get him off our books, and then he becomes somebody else's issue if he's going to be injury prone there.
So I reckon we put him in the sell for when he becomes available to be sold. Even though we can't sell him, so he might be sold. It might be sold in January or summer, but ultimately, he's probably one that you're going to try and sell if you can get the wages off thing. I mean, we're going to be forced to keep him. Loan him is another option, but maybe he'll go out. We'll put him in the loan because we're sort of in the middle of everything. We'll put him in the loan because when he's fit, he might go out on another loan, and they can pick the wages up, and then he can prove himself, and then we can sell him. So we'll go with that. Fill in that box. Fabio Silva. Goodness me. 21, Fabio Silva doesn't seem to have a future at Wolves, does he? The wonder kid, 35 million, 3 loans in 3 different countries, contract till 2026. What do you do? It's like, how do you solve a problem like Maria, like from The Sound of Music? How do you solve a problem like Fabio Silva, mate?
I think this year, Dave, it's got to be the decision. It's got to be the season where they make the decision to sell him. I think there is a point that you made in the first part as well about profit and sustainability, about incomings and outgoings. Obviously, 35 million, huge outgoing. You're not going to get near that for this sale. So the incoming on Fabio Silva, the loss is going to be huge. But you have to sell him, because with his contract going until 2026, he'll be entering his final year of his deal this time next season.
Yeah.
And if that happens and we lost him on a free, that would be, there's already people saying this is the worst deal Wolves have ever done. It can get worse with Fabio if he was to be lost on a free. So I think there has to be sold this summer for as much money as possible. If we get 10 million, that's great business. it's the best of a bad situation. It's not great business, in the grand scheme of things. But if you look at where we are now, the position we're in, £10 million, really good money for him. And yeah, we just have to cut our losses. Maybe if you include a sell-on clause and he recovers his form, because like we said with a few of the players, he's still only 21. He could still find that form, but for me, I just never saw it really at Porto. He played so few games, and then it's such a big fee.
Had he come in at 15 million, it's a different ball game altogether. It's just the it's just a thing, and that's also that sort of like boys. And then the next one we're going to talk about, Goncalo Guedes, is kind of the thing that stung Fosun and the owners from splashing out big fees. Okay, but we talked about Matheus Cunha, that one paid off. Yeah. But they, big money, 35 million on, and big money on Goncalo Guedes. I mean, Goncalo Guedes, the next one, his current value, however, might be too high for the club to sell him without a big financial hit. He was a very expensive. He's already had 3 loans in the past 2 seasons. I mean, would you loan him out? Would you sell him? He's not going to be kept, or would you loan him out with an obligation to buy?
I think that's probably the best we can hope for, Dave, because I don't think there's going to be sufficient interest in him. That means we can take a hit on Fabio and Guedes. If it was just one of them, we might be all right to get away with selling him for a real low fee, in terms of percentage of what we bought him for. I just don't see there being sufficient interest to come in and buy him, because obviously he went home to Benfica. He was all right, but it didn't really work out to the way he probably would have wanted. So I think the best solution the club can hope for this summer with Guedes is a loan with an obligation to buy if he plays X amount of games. Because I think in an ideal world for the club, we just sell him, so we loan him with an obligation to buy at the end of the loan. But no club's really going to want to commit to that. So in a realistic world, it has to be a loan. And if they're happy with what they see after 10, 15 games, well, you have to buy him then.
So a loan, but if we can put him in the middle there, that would be kind of ideal. But like loan to buy. Daniel Podence, mate. Daniel Podence. The point size mighty happen. Had a great season with Olympiacos last season. Obviously, they won the Europa League. He's 28. It seems like Olympiacos would love to make last season's loan a permanent move. He's really happy there. He went back to there. But the 2 clubs need to agree terms. It seems like Daniel Podence has made it clear he doesn't want to be at Wolves. I think he's sort of like, this is the guy that starts fights in pre-season. He's so little, and he's got a little bit of a thing about him. But on his day, he's fantastic. But what are you doing with him? How much are you selling him for if you're letting him go?
It's a definite sell, Dave. I think Olympiacos definitely have an interest in him, and they're coming off the back of success with him in the squad. I think Jack mentioned on one of the extra times that Olympiacos might have an option of 5 million or around that. If I was the club, I would try and negotiate for more, but at the same time, if the option's there, you have to accept the option before they walk away from the table, and you're left with a player that I'm not really sure who else would want. It seems as though he's happy in Olympiacos. They're happy with him. Maybe the best thing to do is take the 5 million. The one thing I would be cautious about with Olympiacos is, obviously they're the same. The owner of Olympiacos is also the owner of Nottingham Forest, and being the owner of Nottingham Forest and both clubs means that if he wanted to sell Daniel Podence from Olympiacos to Nottingham Forest, it's the same. The deal could happen, however. And I know that, from his time at Wolves, Nuno enjoyed working with Daniel Podence. He was obviously keen to bring him in back in January of 2020. So I'd be maybe a bit cautious to watch that one, just to see that he doesn't come back to the Premier League. But ultimately, if you sell him to Olympiacos, he's their player. They can do whatever they want with him.
Absolutely. That brings us on to Nathan Fraser, doesn't it? Yeah. Nathan Fraser. Obviously, he played a little bit last season. Almost went on loan in January, but wasn't able to get a deal done. He's 19. He's in the final year of his contract as well, apparently.
Yeah, and that's the concerning thing, because especially in the early parts of the season and even towards the middle of the season, he looked quite a good player. He showed promising signs. Obviously, scored the goal in the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup?
Yeah, Carabao Cup.
Carabao Cup. So he looked really promising. It just died off towards the end of the season. I think it could have been confidence, or maybe he wanted to go on loan and the club didn't allow him. Obviously, we'll never know the ins and outs of that. But I think he looks ready for first team football, Dave, and obviously being only 19, he looks ready, which is a good sign for a young player like that.
Just lacks pace.
Yeah, I think if he plays more of a poacher, if he was playing in a side that plays 10 yards further up the pitch, like in a championship side who are pushing for the title, who are going to control games a lot more, he could look like a really good player, because he can finish now, like I said about that goal in the Carabao Cup. I wouldn't be against keeping him, but that contract situation needs to be sorted. But also, if a club come in with a loan and an option to buy, I wouldn't be against that either, Dave.
I think if he's going to go out on loan, he hasn't got long left on his contract. It's like, we'll loan you out, but you've got to sign a longer contract.
Yeah, we mentioned that a few times in the series.
You've got to protect, and then there's a sell-on fee. I think Nathan, to be honest, I think he's definitely one for me that would benefit from going out on loan and for a championship club, and it might even be a League One club, depending on who comes in for him. But it'd toughen him up a lot, and he'd get a lot of game time. So we'll put him on a loan. But Nathan, you can go on loan, but you need to sign a new contract.
Yeah.
Who's up next?
The next one is Leon Chiwome, and he obviously replaced Fraser in the starting lineup a few times.
18.
Yeah,
apparently he's in for the new contract, isn't he?
Yeah. Obviously, he stepped up when required, which was really good, because we needed a striker, and he showed positive signs, but he just filled the gap, really. I don't think any more of it can be said from that. But also, you wouldn't expect any more from him. In some games he played, he looked a bit out of place at senior level. So I think the best thing for him is to stay at the club in the under-23s. As if he went on loan, I think he would look out of place too. I don't think he's quite ready for that jump to senior level yet. So under-23s is the best thing for him.
I agree. So we're gonna keep him.
Okay.
He'll get opportunities as and when needed, but he'll get more experiences. As I say, just signed that new contract as well. So next up is this Chirewa.
Yeah, Tawanda Chirewa.
Yeah. So they always get the two mixed up.
Yeah.
Stepped up last season due to injuries. Impressed. Another young talent. 20-year-old Zimbabwe international. Contract up till 2026. Recently made his international debut.
Yeah, he looked really promising to me, Dave. I think back to the Arsenal game in particular at home, starting the game against, I think they were the then league leaders, and he played really well. I was very impressed with what I saw. A friend of mine watched him whilst he was at Ipswich, and he told me when we signed him, this is a serious player. And obviously he was initially signed for the academy, but when he did play, he didn't look too out of place. I thought
out of all of the ones that came in, he was the one that looked more at the level.
Yeah, exactly, Dave. And if we're struggling in terms of depth, I'd be happy with him as a backup. I think he's capable of filling that role. But similar to Enzo Gonzalez, the best thing he could do is play week in, week out, and that's not going to happen at Wolves. So providing we get sufficient cover in, I'd be happy to loan him. If not, I'm also very happy with him. But that 2026 contract, I'm also quite keen to renew that soon if I was Matt Hobbs.
So where am I putting him? Keep or loan?
We'll loan him, Dave. We'll loan him.
As long as he's that's cool. Who's up next?
This is the last player for the keep loan style, and this is Kem Campbell.
Yeah. Now he showed some promise on loan. Yeah. He's contracted till 2026. Can he make it in the Premier League, or is this another one that they might sell? You might sell.
Well, this reminds me quite a lot of the Luke Cundle from Part 2. Now, obviously, his contract situation isn't great, being till 2026, especially as a young player. As an academy graduate, as we've mentioned in both his first and second parts, he represents pure profit and sustainability, which is great. Even the top clubs are starting to really have to abide by those rules now. I think if the offer was right for him, I would be happy to sell. I wouldn't really think twice. Again, it would probably be 1 or 2 million, the same as Luke Cundle. I'd be keen to include a sell-on clause because you never know, he might develop a lot of potential and become a top player. But I just think, from my notes, Dave, we've got sufficient cover with the players we've got.
So we've got quite a nice balance there. But obviously, there's quite a lot of them on loan. We're selling a few of those. So really, the next part of this is all about the in-depth analysis and research that Lewis has done with his scouting network, and the 6 potential players that he's got lined up to talk about that he thinks potentially could come in to add to the squad. So that's the squad as we got. But the next part, which I hope you'll find really interesting, is who's going to be potentially coming in and who Lewis would sign. Okay, mate, over to you.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense to talk about the right wing position first. Obviously, if Neto does depart, that leaves a significant gap to fill, and it has to be for probably the first time in the series a direct replacement for Neto. So it's going to be a big money signing. And I've picked out 3 players that I think could fulfill that role. The first is a player who spent last season on loan at Frosinone Calcio in Italy, and he's Matheus Cunha.
Matheus Cunha. So let me just put this up on the screen. This is Matheus Cunha, yeah?
Yeah, so he's an Argentinian player. I'm not sure if he was included in the squad for the Copa Americas. I know he was at least in the under-21s there. Last season, for a side that got relegated at, Frosinone Calcio were relegated, finishing 18th, he scored 11 goals and assisted 3. So
in a relegated team.
Yeah, in a poor side, that's a good return. Obviously, he's a bit on the other end of the goal contribution spectrum in comparison to Neto, obviously scoring more goals. But I don't really mind that. I think in our state as a club, the most important thing is the goals get scored. And if he's going to come in and score those, I'm happy with that. He struggled to gain consistent game time since arriving at Juventus. And I think he could be available for around 25 million, which is about right for what I'd expect him to be worth. And I think it could be a really interesting signing if that's how they decided to go.
Fantastic. So that's that one there, which is interesting. You say you got another 2 in this position.
Yeah, the next one is another kind of natural right winger in Amad Diallo. He's currently at Man United. He signed from Atalanta in January 2021 for a fee which could rise to 37 million. It was an initial 19 million, I think. He's had a few loans, like some of our players, and he has struggled for game time. But when he's played, often coming off the bench, he's looked quite promising, and I think he scored a goal in either the FA Cup semi-final or the he scored a goal. I remember watching him, so it was quite a good one. But he's a young player, still 21, and he showed really promising signs. And there have been rumours that he could be moved on this summer to help them with FFP2. Man United still also struggle with that. But obviously, when you're negotiating with a club the size of Man United to buy one of their younger, more talented players, it's always going to be a bit of a challenge. So I looked online for a valuation of Diallo, and Transfer Market have him valued at 18 million euros, but I'd probably expect any deal Wolves would do to cost around 25 million euros, and they'd probably insert some sell-on clauses, as Man City did with the Tommy Doyle deal did too. So, he's one that I'd probably say is probably a bit less likely than Matheus Cunha, but he'd be a player I'd be very happy to sign.
That's a good pick out there. And you've got one more?
And
these are direct Neto replacements, these are.
Yeah, and this one, Dave, this Fabio Vieira, who plays for Arsenal currently. Now, he's another player who's struggled for playing time since arriving in the Premier League. And Arsenal signed him in June 2022 for 35 million. But he's really struggled for game time. And he's now 24, so he's going to look for secure, regular first-team football. He did make the Euro squad, but I don't think he's a part of the first team in Portugal. So he's also a bit of a different player to Matheus Cunha and Diallo, in that he's not a like-for-like replacement for Neto, as he's an attacking midfielder. But I don't think that's an issue, as players very often change from a central attacking midfield player to become a winger. I mean, you only have to look at Foden, Palmer, and Sarabia also did that. And another point which could make this deal more likely is that his agent is Jorge Mendes, who's well known for his involvement with the club, and that could be a really useful factor for Wolves to make any deal happen. And also, surprisingly, for a player who went to Arsenal, he only earns £42,000, which is more than half of what Sarabia earns at the moment. So, if this player did come in, obviously we'd have Neto's wage off the bill and also Sarabia's. This could be a really smart bit of business if we could get him in.
I like that, mate. So that's the 3 direct Neto replaces, but you've got another 3 lined up in the striking department, and we've been screaming out for that striker. Obviously, the Che Adams thing hasn't gone away. We're not going to talk about him, but if he comes in on a free, he'll be more of a squad player. This is the main man to lead the line that you're thinking of. Yeah,
exactly. Obviously, Che Adams, there is interest still there, although Nottingham Forest have shown an interest too in recent weeks. But this shortlist that I've pulled together are kind of centre forward, your traditional number 9s, and they would obviously, most of them would cost a bit more. But when you're signing a player who's going to score your goals, that you have to pay that kind of money. So the first is a man called Artem Dovbyk, and he's coming off the back of a really successful season with Girona.
Is that
the Ukrainian?
This guy?
Yeah, that player there.
Mate, I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley.
Yeah, he's a very tall, physical player, Dave. And I think that's really the type of profile of striker we should look to sign, a physical number 9, someone who's going to be up against the centre halves. And this is the part I really like about him. He scored 24 goals and created 8 assists in 36 games last season for Girona in the league.
Incredible.
So obviously, with stats such as these, the interest is inevitably high, and AC Milan have been linked with him. But the fee's not going to be cheap either. Transfer market having valued at about 35 million. But one thing I would say is that Wolves might have an ace up their sleeve with this transfer. So it's no secret that Man City hold an interest in Pedro Neto, particularly with key forward Bernardo Silva set to leave the club this summer. But with that in mind, could the Wolves recruitment team structure a deal with the City Group, who own Girona, which would see Dovbyk join Wolves for a slightly reduced fee, and Man City have favourable terms when negotiating with Neto? I think that could be something that the recruitment team could push.
Exactly, Dave. Because let's face it, Tommy Nunes' fee was lower, but so was Tommy Doyle's.
Exactly. If we could strike up that kind of deal, and also Santiago Bueno was a part of that deal coming from Girona. Yeah. So I think if we could get that kind of deal in place, Man City can have Neto, but we can have this guy. I think that would be a really interesting deal the recruitment team could explore.
I like it. Next up.
The next player is Levi Garcia, and he's played for AEK Athens. Another physical player, but this time, unlike Dovbyk, he's a lot more mobile. He's very quick too. And again, being physical, very tall, capable of bullying defenders. That's exactly the mould of what I think Wolves should be looking for in their striker this summer. He played 20 times last season and scored 13 goals, which is a fairly impressive goal-to-game ratio. Obviously, playing in the Greek league, the attractiveness of a Premier League football could tempt him. But I think this deal probably would be a lot more straightforward than the Dovbyk one. And obviously, the significantly reduced fee could mean he's more attractive to the club as well.
I like that. That's really good. Some great research, and you've got one more potential number 9 for us.
Yeah, the last one is Boulaye Dia from Salernitana, and obviously this is one that Wolves fans will be very familiar with because we were linked with him heavily last summer, and the deal just didn't quite end up happening as the president decided he would not be sold.
I remember that.
Yeah, so
he went on a rant, didn't he?
Yeah, that really strained relationships between Dia and the club, and it meant he didn't play as much as he should have last season. He only played 17 times in the league and scored 4 goals. However, like the other 2 players, he really fits the profile of the player I think Wolves should be interested in for the striker position. And obviously, in recent weeks, we've seen rumours that Wolves have called their interest in Dia, but I don't think he should be written off yet. And I think for a fee of, this is the cheapest player of the 3 strikers I'd shortlisted, he could be around for around 10 or 12 million this summer. It could be exactly what we're looking for at a reduced fee.
I like it, mate. So, listen, that's some amazing research that you've done there. Really amazing research, guys. I hope you've really enjoyed this because, we've put a lot of time and effort into these this 3-part series. If you haven't checked out the defenders and the keepers or the midfielders, check that one out. But it's also really interesting on all of these is like the potential research that Lewis has done, identifying potential, if the deals go through and Wolves raise the money, potential players that could come in to really strengthen the team and add depth, which is something that we're definitely looking to do. Obviously, if you've enjoyed it, you value this, smash that like, hit the subscribe button. Loads more news and content. We'll be doing some more videos with Lewis on different subjects as well over the summer. But we'll put the links to the midfielders and the defenders and keepers on the end of this. Obviously, we're still in June as we've done all of these. Things can change very rapidly. The transfer window doesn't start until after the season's ended. So the season started at the end of August. There's a lot of water that's going to go under the bridge. So it'll be interesting to see if any of these players that you've identified and what we've talked about in terms of keeps, loans and sell, how that does pan out. Because like I say, depending on who goes out and what comes in will depend on, who we can afford to buy. But Wolves, Lewis, they've started the transfer window quite strong early. And obviously, Pedro Lima seems to be one that will be coming in soon. So, what are you hoping for at the end of the transfer window?
Well, yeah, Dave, like you mentioned, it's unusual for Wolves to start doing their business as early as they have, but I'm a big fan of it. I think getting players in for pre-season and on that first day means that Gary has the maximum time available to him to work with them, and that means he can make decisions. We spoke about how maybe there'll be a decision that needs to be made with Chiquinho. If Chiquinho is okay, we're going to sell him to Sporting for say £15 million. Well, then we have time because we've made that decision early on enough to then go and find that replacement. So I think the business being done earlier is only a positive. Obviously, I understand the financial implications. You have more weeks' wages to pay in comparison to signing them in the last week of August. But I'm very happy with that. I think we've discussed 3 more targets that we'd 3 more positions to fill. So obviously the goalkeeper, 4. The goalkeeper, the centre half, the striker, and the right winger. If we got those 4 positions covered with the 3 that we'd already bought in Tommy Doyle, Rodrigo Gomez, and possibly Pedro Lima, that's 7 players, which is a really successful window for the club. And it's bought in, and providing everything goes to plan, it provides that quality, but also the depth, which is a key point for me.
Absolutely. Guys, really hope you've enjoyed this series. Let us know what you think of what we've had to say in the comments section below. And we'll see you very, very soon with some more. So, yeah, always Wolves. Subscribe for more Wolves news and content from myself and Lewis. Until the next one, always Wolves.
Always Wolves.